welcome to another episode of Design Under Influence. We are your hosts, Alex and Boris. Today, we're unpacking a subject that would help architects think and actually act on their competitive advantage, which is technology. And we're going to look into IT offense versus IT defense, what each represents. And as I already mentioned, here to help me unpack this is my co-host and CEO of Arc IT, Boris. Hey, good morning.
Hey, Alex, good morning. How's your day going?
The day's going great, but let's dive right into the subject that's going to go better from there. So today's Monday. Those of you who are watching us, so happy Monday. You're probably not watching on Monday, but
it is Monday.
But it is Monday, yeah. So defense and offense. I'll just quickly high level what these concepts mean from a perspective of your internet internet technology. And so on the defense, when we talk about IT defense, these are your most important pieces of infrastructure in terms of security and productivity and efficiency, right? So, it's covering your bases essentially to protect your firm and to, be able to run your day-to-day operations. Now, IT offense, you probably don't hear as much. We're talking here more about strategic approach and continuous improvement as part of IT offense. And I think by the end of the show, you will understand why combining the two actually results in your competitive advantage. Because otherwise, you have most firms that are okay on the defense, very few look into offense. So we'll unpack these two for you today. So Boris, let's start with defense, because defense wins championships. Defense is a must. Talk us through some defensive strategies and what are the components of good defense?
So when we're looking at a good defensive plan, the first thing that comes to mind is cybersecurity. I think especially now in the last year, as we've been working remotely and working from home, it's become a big topic of conversation. So cybersecurity is a must for a good defensive IT plan. And inside of that cybersecurity bubble, we can talk about making sure that you have, a antivirus software that is centrally managed and can effectively minimize risks of viruses happening. Making sure that you have URL filtering, right? So if your employee or team member goes to a bad website, those websites get blocked by the protection software to make sure that they can get a virus or be part of the scam. Make sure that you have advanced email protection in place, because most of the time the standard Microsoft or Google filters that you get, they don't protect you against phishing attacks and advanced threats like spear phishing, where people have some specific information about your firm or an employee and try to get them to do something by pretending that they're someone else. Another thing is to have good backups and a backup strategy. We find a lot that, if you don't have the previous components in place, at least having good backups can protect you and help you recover if any of those, any cybersecurity events happen. Like if you get ransomware and all your files become encrypted, you can use backups to restore your files and get back to operating your business, as opposed to just losing data altogether. But all of this is great. To add, though, we need to make sure that our team is constantly evolving in terms of cybersecurity and understanding the newest threats that are out there. So ongoing security training for your team is also very important, as well as making sure that somebody is managing and watching your devices and your servers and patching them from the latest threats as well, because there's stuff that comes out all the time and that you may not be aware of. So you need somebody to help you protect your systems from the new threats.
Very good. So the first component I'm just going to summarize. The first component of defensive plan is your cybersecurity. And that has to do with antivirus, URL filters, advanced email protection, backups. Make sure your team is trained and understands, because typically that is your weakest link. This is how the bad guys come in, through one of your employees. So you got to have that training done on an ongoing basis, and then also patching the system from the latest threats. What is the second component of defense, Boris?
Well, it's knowing what you have, right? So it's making sure that you have very good proper network documentation of all the equipment that you have in your environment. If it's hardware, also making sure you're documenting all of your applications that you use, whether they're on-premise or in the cloud, right? So if you're using HR software, marketing software, Google Drive, Dropbox, or anything like that, all of that needs to be documented. Access to it needs to also be managed and documented to make sure that only people that need access have access, and not just everybody blanketly can access any of your tools. Making sure for any hardware that you are tracking when the devices were purchased and when the warranties expire, because a lot of times we find when we bring a client on, they have devices that are 7-8 years old, and they're wondering why they're not performing as they used to. I mean, a lifetime for a good design workstation is anywhere from 3 to 5 years. It should be replaced for sure after 5 years. So having a device that's 7-8 years old is really impacting productivity of your team because it's much slower than newer devices, and it's costing you more money than you would have otherwise invested into a new device. And then making sure that if you are using software tools, that you keep them up to date with the latest updates and upgrades. A lot of the new features are getting rolled out every on a much faster scale now than it used to be. So you want to be on top of those changes to make sure that your team is always using the latest tools and are being more productive because of that.
Got you. Perfect. So the second component of a good defensive plan is, we call it inventory and documentation management. And the components there are, knowing how old your systems are, understanding what warranties you have for what devices, timely replacement of devices, because when you know how old they are, you understand when you need to and budget for the investment into new equipment, and then of running software updates and upgrades on a regular basis. So that's your inventory documentation piece of a defensive plan. Let's go on the third and last component of a good defense.
Well, the last component is ongoing monitoring and management, whether it's your network or your cloud applications. It's making sure that we are monitoring for any potential issues that may become a problem down the line. They usually manifest themselves during this process, right? So if we're looking at network traffic, or if we're looking at system performance, or if we're looking at application performance, we usually see those things manifest themselves before your team members or yourself see them. And we can then take action to protect you and your firm from an issue, like a file server going down because a power supply failed, or a disk failed, or your internet going down because your router is old, or your internet not performing as it's supposed to because your router is old. So all of those things, if you're proactively monitoring your network and your devices and your applications, can come up and can be taken care of before they actually cause a problem for your business.
So the last component of a good, solid defensive plan is proactive monitoring and management of all the systems that keep your business open and operating. So that was a good, I think, overview of a defensive plan. I think most of companies out there, more architecture firms out there, sort of have at least understanding that this needs to be done. They're not necessarily have all of those things patched up and implemented, but I think that's what people commonly refer to as think of an IT provider as covering those bases, like creating a decent or good defensive plan. Now let's switch gears a little bit and talk about offense. I've run a number of businesses myself, and I've seen and friends with a lot of other entrepreneurs, and this is very I would say this is uncommon. I'd say about 10 to 20% of businesses that I'm familiar with actually have the offense part of their IT planned out, rolled out. So let's get into the particular components of the offensive plan, Boris. What's the first piece of the offense?
Well, Alex, I think the first piece is having a technology roadmap, right? So because you need to know where you're going and how to get there, because otherwise you'll never get there, right? I mean, that's kind of the basic premise. You want to make sure you understand how you're going to make your investments into next year, 2 years, and 3 years to align technology investments with your business plan and your business strategy going forward. So if you're looking to grow your firm, what do you need to do from a technology standpoint to make that happen? If you're looking to, let's just take an example. You won architecture contest, right? And now you're more popular. You're getting more projects from it. You just signed a big client that's going to give you a lot more work. You're anticipating a lot more work in the next couple of years. How are your systems going to align with that? Does it mean you need to bring more people? Yes. Does it mean you need better tools? Possibly yes. So all of that needs to be you need to stop for a second, take a deep breath, and think about these things to make sure that you're making the right moves going forward.
But there's also, right, so there's a cost component to a strategy like that, right? So talk us through the second piece of that roadmap.
So the second piece of the roadmap is budgeting. So once you know what things you need to do to accomplish your business goals and the investments you need to make into technology for that to happen, you basically need to budget for those things, right? You need to gather quotes for things that you're looking to implement. You need to put some money aside to make sure that you stay a course with that implementation.
Gotcha. So first part of the offense is if having a roadmap, having a plan. Imagine, a team, NFL or any other team getting out on a field without a plan. They're just playing ball. That's not going to win championship or games. So roadmap, i.e. plan, is number one. What's the second piece of offense, Boris?
I think we should call it technology stack development, and maybe that's too many technical terms, but basically it's looking at the tools that you have right now, seeing how that matches up to your roadmap and to your plan for the business, and evaluating whether you're actually using those tools, figuring out, talking to your team, figuring out how much or how many features or what are you using and why are you using that tool. A lot of times what we find is that there's redundant tools all over the place in the firms that we start working with, where they can be easily consolidated to lower your IT spend, or use that money for something else that is actually part of your IT roadmap. So kind of evaluating the tools, understanding how you use them, hoping looking for consolidation opportunities in tool redundancy, and then kind of making sure that all the tools that that are left can talk to each other, right? So they're part of this cohesive unit of technology solution for your firm, where they can easily integrate, the information can be easily passed from one place to the other, and it's much easier to then it makes it much easier to use those tools as one, so that the data can easily flow from one to the other. I think I went a little overboard here, but
no, it makes complete sense.
Get us on the right track, Alex.
Yeah, well, so the second part of the offensive plan is, after having a plan, you need to make sure that your tools are stacked correctly, right? There's no redundancy. You're not paying double for something that's solving in one problem. You're not, having too many tools, and documentation everywhere. So consolidation, and then a cohesive, sort of integrated feel to all your tech, right? To all your technology. Just like carpenter that has tools of the trade, architects have tools of the trade, and you need to make sure those are accessible, available, updated, and your team knows how to use them. So that's your second piece. Let's talk about the third piece, which I think, again, that's the most nearest and dearest to me. I'm going to just jump in and say it's called continuous improvement. So how do we continue to build our offense? So talk us through that, Boris. What are the pieces there?
All right, so I think one of the most important pieces is to have a strategic technology conversation inside of your firm, right? So if you're a firm and you have an IT manager or an IT director, it's basically involving them in business conversations and making sure they understand where the business is going. If you're a smaller firm and you're working with an outside provider, is involving them in those conversations as well, and having regular meetings, maybe once a month or at least once a quarter, to review your business strategy and kind of update the roadmap and figure out if there's additional things that you need to do from a strategic technology standpoint to achieve your business goals. So that would be one. Number two is, new tool evaluations, or have a process in place that helps you look at new tools, because there's new tools, for architects and engineers that are coming probably, once every couple of weeks. You want to make sure you have a process for evaluating those. You have dedicated people who can look at the tools and see if they can benefit your business, and how much of those tools are you actually going to be using, right? Again, going back to previous number two is making sure that you're using the tools as efficiently as possible. So new tools evaluation process, and then implementation of new tools. So once the tools have been evaluated, how do you roll them out to everybody on your team to make sure that they're actually using them? Because if they're not using them, then you're basically spending money, I'm going to say, for nothing, right? Because you're not getting the full benefit and not using the tools to full efficiency. So I think those are all the steps of continuous improvement initiatives for your firm.
All right, let me summarize the offensive plan when it comes to your IT as an architecture firm. One, have a roadmap, technology roadmap that aligns with your business goal and plans. You need to tie that roadmap into a budget so you understand how much you will be spending on IT and have that number predictable and managed through a budget. The second piece of your offensive plan is a tech stack development. What we mean by that is understanding your current tools, how they fit in, how they work together, consolidating, and then integration of all of the current tools so they can all be efficient in communicating with each other, as well as your team is able to utilize and maximize their output, their happiness, by using those, the tool set that you provided. And then last piece, and probably one of the most important pieces, is the continuous improvement. Having your IT provider sit down with you on a regular basis and review a strategic roadmap, review your budget, review the current tool set, understand, also have a process how to evaluate new tools, because there's a lot that goes in there. That process, evaluating new software, needs to be dialed and rolled out, as well as once the evaluation is complete and you chose a provider, the implementation piece is also key. As Boris pointed out, you implement software and no one's using it, it's vaporware and nobody cares, right? It's just a waste of resources. So I'm just going to go ahead and summarize the IT defense versus offense for architects. We often say, in fact, that's our company's sort of tagline and motto is, technology is your competitive advantage. Just focusing on defense will not, in fact, provide you that advantage. I think focusing on defense will give you fairly smooth operations, but the offense is that edge, that piece that probably 80 to 90% of other businesses, your competitors, your friends, whatever, don't have in place. Most IT providers are generic, meaning that they work within multiple industries, and they just don't have the knowledge, the horsepower, the understanding, the desire, the need, to be honest with you, to manage your offense. And that's why a lot of IT companies will just stay with the defense. Just wanted to mention Arc IT, we're passionate about making technology our clients' competitive advantage. And this is where we shine. This is where we come in. This is how we're different. It takes a little time to recognize this, but once you do, our clients are in the position to take advantage of this. And we hope you could be as well, at least by being educated on it and asking your provider to potentially help you put together the offensive plan using our specific structure in the article for this particular show. And if they're not helping you, we'd love an opportunity to do business with you. Boris and I would sit down, do a discovery call, and see if we can maybe just help with advice, or maybe we can work with you. So Arc IT, you can find us at getarchit.com. We really appreciate you taking the time to download this knowledge, watch our show, and we hope that you have a wonderful day. Thank you for watching.
Thank you, everyone. And remember, technology is your competitive advantage.